say you're fine, but I can see right through. You're holding your secrets for way too long. This can't keep going on. With every lie, they keep on hurting you, getting away with everything they do. This can't keep going on. No, we're gonna find them, and I'm gonna fight for you. They better start hiding. We'll be running with the lions, lions. We'll be running with the lions, lions. They can't run, they can't hide. We won't stop until they're down. We'll be running with the lions, lions.
Well, hello, everybody. Happy Sunday, and also happy International Women's Day. Friday was the official day, but let's just make it a whole month of celebrating women. And I love this because this is a time to rise and shine for all of us and for us to do what we love. And part of what I love is doing this show. So for those of you who are new to the show, Gloves Off is really about people that I'm interviewing and people that I see in this everyday world that really bring a positive impact to not only the people that they interact with, but for humanity. And they are people that have often had a turning point that has led them in a more authentic direction. And that is something that's very close to my heart because it's something that has happened to me and changed the trajectory of my life for sure. And for those of you who have been watching, I appreciate all the amazing comments that I've been receiving and the feedback. So please keep it coming. So today I have a very special guest on the show, and his name is Evan Galeano. He is an award. He has had awards for filmmaking. And you know what? What I love about him is it's not only his work, he's just truly a fantastic human being. But before I get into more about Evan, I just want to say a little bit about my sponsor, Elevated CPA. Now, I know tax season is right around the corner, and taxes are something that no one likes, but who does your taxes makes a big difference in how you feel about them. I have not dreaded tax season in a long time because with Elevated CPA, I know they got my back. All right, everyone, are we ready to dive right in and get Evan to talk about the way that he strategically tells stories? Now, I have to admit, when I first met Evan, I just thought, okay, another video guy. He's just going to hold that camera and, talk about how great his strategy is. But I have to say, I was pleasantly surprised. So, Evan, welcome to the show, and I'm so happy to have you here, and I can't wait to dive into your incredible story.
Hi, Dr. Coppin. I'm happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Oh, of course. Been excited about this episode for a while.
Same.
So tell me what makes your storytelling so different. I mean, I have to say that when I first met you, I didn't really understand what it was until I saw your brand story, and that completely changed my mind.
Yeah. So the brand story, oh man, I think the origins of the brand story was really, I went to film school, and when I was, in film school, we were learning how to tell stories to entertain, right? Stories that would hook viewers, give them emotional catharsis, and really just, something that they can believe in, right? Like that's the kind of like the whole point of good storytelling is we get lost in the story. And that was really the reason I got into filmmaking in the first place, was because I would really use films as an escape from a childhood that often, times I was left to my own devices for, and we can get into that later, but where it became strategic for me was, I started to see all the small businesses while I was in film school. I started to see small businesses that needed help with their social media marketing, with video content, and the marketing content that I was seeing that businesses were putting out was lacking in that, in some very crucial elements of storytelling. So they had the marketing strategy down. They would oftentimes put together advertisements that would be trying to sell some type of product or service, but where they would miss it is that they're very, very clearly the intention behind whatever they were making was to make money. Mm-hmm. And so ultimately, where I saw there was a huge gap in the market for many small businesses, something that I think really big brands had figured out, but that most small businesses quite hadn't figured out yet, because they weren't working with these multi-million-dollar agencies, right? That had all of these the storytelling ability, and this award-winning advertising abilities. And so I saw this opportunity to tell authentic stories for these small businesses. And to illustrate the point, I guess I can give one example. Was an auto shop that I saw. It was a friend of mine. It was her family's auto shop in high school. And I moved back to Burbank, moved back in with my parents after film school. And I saw that this auto shop, they were the most honest auto shop I had ever been to. They didn't try to rip me off, but they were failing because they didn't have their social media set up and they weren't telling their story. They weren't telling it authentically. They had a lot of advertising content out. They had a lot of trying to, put out discounts, come and get your oil change, and we're going to give you all these discounts. So they were trying to competitively design their marketing in a way that would basically make them the cheapest option. And they were failing. They were going to go out of business. And I just remember meeting the owner, and I could tell we need to strategically tell this story in a way that people can get people to see the value. So we don't have to be cutting all of these discounts and really not having any room for profit.
Right. Such a common misconception, right? I mean, we always feel, and it's because a lot of this is led by society, and we're just undercutting ourselves over and over again. And when we lose that profit margin, we lose the ability to continue to do business. So when we think about it like that, it really changes people's perspective drastically, because I see everyone out there and that's fear driven, by the way, right? I mean, right there is the most common example of a fear driven approach, where you undermine your value, you let fear drive the bus, and then you start cutting costs to compare yourself with the lowest common denominator. It's never a good plan. Better to differentiate yourself in a higher realm.
Yeah. And so I became very, it was a friend of mine. It was her family's business. And so I became very interested in how can we turn this around? I audited their website. They didn't have a website. I audited kind of their approach. They really just were on Facebook and Instagram. And again, they were posting a lot of stuff that was really depositioning them rather than actually showcasing their value. It was more so giving off an impression that they didn't quite even believe in their value. So we had to turn that around by getting into the brand story. And at the time, I called it a video business card. I was like, you guys need a video business card, something that's going to act like a business card, but is going to be more than just a piece of paper or a flyer with a discount on it. We need to show people who you are. And part of the story is stories are all about people. So when I would meet that owner, the shop owner, Tino, and shake his hand, you could just tell he had an integrity about him. And that wasn't coming through anywhere. It wasn't coming through on their social media, and it certainly wasn't coming through on their non-existent website. So the answer was let's build one pager website, and let's get a video on there where we can actually meet Tino, have a conversation with him, not with a script, not with some type of sales pitch, but actually just sit down and get to know him for 30 seconds and have him explain, right? So this is where I started taking my documentary approach of filmmaking, where in documentaries, they're not scripted. We're asking authentic questions and we're getting authentic, genuine answers back that the audience we can feel that when there's an authentic presence on screen versus a scripted, especially with many of these people aren't actors, right?
Well, especially, it's not perfect, it's imperfect, but that's the beauty of it. And
Yes.
I remember in my early days of being on camera, I had I was actually on the news quite a bit. So I had one of the people that I knew on the news station, he did some video work on the side, and he was forcing me to use a teleprompter for my videos. And I have to tell you, every time I did it, the words just wouldn't even come out of my mouth, because even if I wrote it in a way that felt authentic, I don't know, I just couldn't deliver it. So finally, I just told him, I said, listen, if I have to do it like this, I can't do it. And we went off script and we were done in no time, because it was so easy for me at that point. So it's much, even if it was imperfect, it doesn't matter, right? That's what we get hung up on.
Right. Yeah. That is what most people get hung up on when they get in front of the camera. And I mean, rightfully so. If they have a script, then there is a reason why it's feeling very awkward and forced. Because if you are a business owner and a client or customer potential, a lead comes in through the door, you're not going to pull out a script and start reading from it at them, right? So and so there's always going to be that sense of this isn't quite right. And so the strategic approach to storytelling that really defined Brand Story, and that we've, I think, now made our own. I don't see much for small businesses. I don't see much content being made like this, even still to this day, is that really that capturing the magic of being there in person, capturing the magic of word of mouth through authentic testimonials, that really capture the story. For that business, for the auto shop, Greg's Tune Up is what it was called. Their story was that they had integrity. They were not trying to overcharge their customers, and that story was not being told. So once we put it up on their website, once we got it across their social media, it turned the entire business around within a year. Within a year, they were filled up. I can't even get a same day taken care of over there, and I don't mind it, but
you have to negotiate that in your deal, that if once everything blows up, I still get a place to bring my car. But
they usually try to prioritize me, but they are packed these days. Like
that's awesome.
They're filled up, and I have a testimonial, again, a video testimonial with Tino saying, "Look, this is all because of you," and
awesome.
And that's really the approach that we took with all of our clients moving forward, and with our own brand story that you mentioned.
Well, I'm curious about Tino's story. So because of the integrity, did his female clientele increase? Because this is a common thing that I see, and I've experienced. I took my car in to get an oil change the other day, and they were like $800. I was like, are you kidding me? No.
So yes, absolutely. One of their goals they mentioned to me before we even did the content, I always ask my clients, what are your goals? What are your targets that you want to achieve? And one of them was, we want to get more of a younger demographic in here, because we feel like a lot of them are getting ripped off by all these other auto shops that are taking advantage of these younger kids. And we want to protect the kids in our community. We want to make sure that they are one of the most honest, integrity based. And it's because they have kids, and they had the daughters that were in my high school that I was friends with. So that's really what we centered on, was capturing the word of mouth from their demographic, from the younger audience. We captured footage in the B-roll of Tino giving hugs to the football players that were coming in, and really treating them like they were his own family. And as a result, absolutely, they have had a huge spike in the younger demographic. I showed them some social media stuff that they could do to kind of really, it's all about, and this is where, again, the strategic storytelling comes in, because there's 1,000 different ways to tell a story. So it's always about what's the best way to tell the story for the specific target audience that's going to get that target audience interested.
Well, it's so important, because I personally, when I was deciding to work with you, I just knew my story was a little, I felt it was complicated, maybe because I do so many different things and I didn't know the best way to really get that out there. So people really had a sense of who I was and what I've been through. And even though I'm extremely verbose, sometimes I didn't feel like I was even able to tell my story in a way that could be depicted in a video. So that was so much of the reason that I decided to work with you. And one thing I noticed from, being not only knowing you as a person, but being on the other side of the camera, I loved the way that you helped craft that story for me. I mean, you gave me direction. I know my story, but you helped me craft it in a way and put together the story in a way that was very compelling and really lets that audience understand my journey and how my journey can impact their journey. Because we often learn from what we've experienced in life. And I feel so much of my life has literally been a testament to unpacking all the crap that's happened to me and then repurposing it for people so that they don't have to go through the struggles that I endured. I want them to have a faster timeline to getting to from where they are to where they want to be than I did. And that was so much of what you helped me convey in my brand story.
I'm glad that you loved it. I really, I always, with every brand story, I will say it's always a challenge. It is always a challenge. It's a challenge to take a legacy and someone's life experience. There's so many. It's a very complex. Life is messy, and it's about finding that through line that is going to really take the proper plot points along the journey. And that way we create a clear, cohesive narrative, right? Like a beginning, middle, and end. And we weave together. There's layers to really, and this is where the study of film, I think, has been very beneficial, because there is multiple aspects of film of a great movie. There's three really driving, I guess you can call them principles of a good story. And this is what I try to weave in. And your story is a perfect example of a story that has all three. And when we really lock in on these three, it's ethos, logos, and pathos. And so ethos is essentially ethics. It's like appealing to the ethical, moral principles and values of the audience. Logos is more logic-based. It's more of the logic-driven, what's going to drive for example, a customer, what's going to drive their purchasing decision. Part of it is logos, right? They need to make sure that they understand the steps that you're going to take them through. That they feel that that's what essentially gives them that, okay, this is legitimate. I can trust this. I see that there's a system, there's some type of process. And then what oftentimes a lot of marketing is missing, and it's the key, is the third one, which is pathos. The pathos, a customer will not buy without pathos, which is emotion driven. This is what's any good marketing, any good sales meeting, any good sales calls you've been on. There is a element of they're appealing to that gut feeling, like this is the right, the giving, right? In our brand stories, I'm always aiming to, is this giving me the chills? Is this giving the viewer the chills? That's what we want, because that when there's this, when the message rings true, the story rings true, oftentimes, yeah, you're gonna, I get responses from people who see my work and say, I'm in tears, I got the chills. I've had people reach out to me just from posting my clients' work saying, I'm not even struggling with that issue, but I want to work with them. And
well, what I love about that is that, when you showed me my brand story video, you wanted to record it. So there I was at home with like no makeup on. My hair was sticking up. Who knows?
Premiere. I always like to see the first reaction.
So you record this and you're like, I want to use this. And I'm like, are you kidding me? This is like, my hair is crazy.
I don't have to use it.
Well, we'll look at it anyway. But what my point of that was not that my hair was sticking up, but the point is that I remember watching my own brand story and being moved to tears by my own story that I already knew. So to me, that is the perfect testament because my story was now told in a different way than I'm used to telling it. And for me, that was a really transformational experience. And I want to say that I equate it to, and I'm not knocking videographers at all. So this is not my intention here, but I want to just bring out that there are some nuances of having a filmmaker do your video versus somebody who just does video. And I equate it to when I was taking piano lessons. So I had a music teacher who taught me piano, and it was a great experience. I can't say it wasn't. But then a few years later, I met this musician and he was working with my son and I asked him to give me piano lessons. Well, let me tell you, my the piano skills increased because he showed me how to create music in a different perspective and in a different way. So I feel like that's a reasonable analogy just by the differences in what your experience is.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that there no disrespect to videographers. Videographers make beautiful work. They learn the ins and outs of the camera, and they learn how to craft, a good looking image. That's really the goal of most videographers. Is they want to learn the gear. They want to know how to put something together. Maybe they learned how to edit, but most haven't actually. One, if they didn't go to film school, or they didn't study storytelling, then there's that's missing. And then also most of them, they learned how to operate a piece of equipment. Doesn't necessarily mean that they understand how a business operates, how a target audience is going to, right, how that's any of that works. And so where I see where a lot of businesses go wrong is they hire more of like a generic production company, or a videographer that works with, like, we do weddings, we do business, we do music videos. The problem with that is if they're not specializing, it's kind of like having, if your business has a very specific problem, like you're not converting leads, that's a very specific problem. And to go to a generalist and expect the work of like a heart surgeon, right? Like a specialist who knows exactly what problems and how to go in there and then solve those problems, then that's just typically why I think a lot of small businesses have this perception that video is overpriced. They could just do it themselves with their phone, because it is over. If all you're paying for is a technician or essentially
a tripod,
a high quality image, with no substance or with no strategic approach, then in that case, it's, I would go and I would hire someone who understands marketing and branding. And it doesn't matter if what they're shooting on. If they're shooting on their iPhone, they're gonna end up probably making better content because they understand the psychology of your audience.
And that makes a huge difference. And, I want to actually dive into, now I feel like now it's time to take the gloves off and deep dive into some deep, dark stories, right?
Metaphorical gloves off. Yeah,
exactly. Got to get into that.
Yeah.
So the thing is, I know that there was this turning point for you, and you had a couple of turning points, it seems like, within your younger days. And, you're still very young, but I feel that the way you present yourself shows some challenges that you've faced in your life and how you overcame those challenges. Because frankly, one of the little secrets, I think this is the right time to bring up the secret that I wanted to share with the audience about you. I pride myself on not making assumptions about people. It's something I've worked on my whole life. And yet, when I first met you, and that was at the RPXP retreat, and I thought to myself, who is this young guy? I don't know how he thinks he knows how to do video, but apparently he thinks he can. And I said all of that in my head quietly up until I saw your brand story, and then I told myself to shut the F up. I've never seen a video like that. I was driven to freaking tears by your brand story video. I was like, oh my God. This is what my story has been missing. So I'm taking off my gloves, calling myself out because I made an assumption. But as I got to know you better, I knew those stories that transformed who you were as a person. So, I don't know which one you want to start with, but, I'd love for you to share with our audience some of the things you've gone through.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think just, adding to what you were mentioning about that sort of stigma maybe that you had around young, you know, young guys claiming to be marketing, that they can help grow a business. And yeah, there's always going to be the common denominator. And I where I feel that with my story, um, I think what changed for me was like what the turning point was when my family faced a lot of that. When my family faced a lot of, growing up, I had a little brother, my little brother, Daniel. He grew up with severe autism, and he's better and better every day, but it's still, he still lives with my parents. And growing up, he was diagnosed when he was 2 years old. So I very quickly realized that, well, at the time I was three and a half. So it was it was something I didn't quite understand right away. But as I grew up, 5, 6 years old, started to sink in, like, I don't really have my brother. He's not going to be in my life the same way that we thought he would. So it was difficult. He was nonverbal, and the stigma started when, autism, the awareness really wasn't there. So oftentimes we would try to go out, and he would have behaviors, he would make noises, and we would get judgmental stares. People who were assuming that my parents weren't raising him properly, that they needed to discipline him better. I don't know. One time we were at a restaurant, and a woman came up, and she came up to my dad. He was trying to take care of my brother. He had removed my brother from the restaurant, and yet she still felt the need to come up to him and tell him that we ruined their meal because my brother was making noises and acting up. To which my dad explained, he has autism. And she still said, yeah, but you can still discipline him better. And so it's like, assumptions, stigmas, all of those things that people, at the time I remember hearing about this story. And as a kid, I didn't really understand, I was still young, but all I thought was like, I didn't realize they let demons on earth.
Mm-hmm.
And
Well,
it wasn't that she was a demon, but that's
right.
how I viewed it when I was a young kid. I was like, gosh, like that. I was like, that woman is pure evil.
And so much happens when we don't understand each other and each other's perspectives and where
Mm-hmm.
we're coming from. It's
Mm-hmm.
part of the main reason I wanted to do this show because, we fight against each other, where
Mm-hmm.
that's not where the fight belongs. We have to understand each other and fight against the other things that are worth fighting for.
Mm-hmm.
So, this woman, I don't think she meant to be mean, but she just had a lack of awareness around the situation.
Right. Yeah. It was this ignorance, right?
Mm-hmm.
This ignorance driving that I started to look around, I think, growing up and just feeling very misunderstood, and like my family was misunderstood. I often would be acting out in class. They tried to diagnose me with ADHD because I was not getting as much attention at home because my parents had a lot on their plate, and I don't blame my parents for any of that. But I did have this sort of void that I would maybe try to fill. And then moving into high school, I think it was something that I never really, it was just an unresolved issue that kept me experiencing social anxiety as I kind of grew up, to a point where in high school I ended up taking an antibiotic and experienced it's sort of like the underlying issues are there, and then this was like the ticking time, like this sort of set off the bomb because I ended up experiencing extremely rare side effects of this medication. It was an antibiotic, a tetracycline, which was a serotonin inhibitor, and it was non-FDA approved. So they essentially unwittingly put me into this test trial for this pharmaceutical, whatever it is. Now, this was really like a scary moment for the whole family because looking into, and I don't want to get into, I know there's like some politics behind this stuff, but like what my parents did in their research with my brother, they found that, and a lot of the holistic doctors they were going to were telling them the vaccines may have had something to do with it, specifically that he was given so many all at once, and his immune system may have not been able to process and take them all, and they may have damaged his immune system, his gut biome, and then, of course, the gut connection to the brain. So there was a lot there that my parents were finding, and they still to this day have an open. I don't know if I can talk about exactly the specifics of it, but they still have some litigation like in court with one of the pharmaceutical companies, and they have all the money in the world, so they can just push it off to infinity.
Mm-hmm.
But it hasn't been closed, which is, I think, indicative of some of these issues. And so now I was experiencing the same thing, and I remember my dad telling my mom, I can't believe it's happening to our other son now. You know, we were
Can't
just
even
trying to
imagine what
get
your
a
poor
medication.
parent.
We were just trying to get a medication for, at the time it was just for acne, and to have where I was literally felt like I was losing my mind, and I lost most of my, I went from having a 4.2 GPA, really, really just, I was in football. I was very social. I had a big social crowd, and I was part of the social scene at the school. And it went from that to me spending most lunches alone in the library my senior year, losing my relationships, losing my friends, having to break up with the girlfriend at the time that that was like my dream girl, and I was having to tell her, hey, you got to cut me loose. I don't know what's going on, but I can't even process things. I'm like completely out of it. I couldn't even have conversations with people because like my mind, it's almost like I was experiencing schizophrenia is how I was experiencing. Like my thoughts were loud, to the point where in the library, I couldn't even read because the words were scrambling across the page. So I thought like at that time, the amount of anxiety, panic attacks, the depression that I then fell into because of that, I thought my life was over. Like senior year, here I'm supposed to be having this, great time. Everyone's going to prom. They're going to like the grad nights. They're going to Disneyland together and I'm completely out, sidelined, looking through the, way out there, just on my own. So I was drowning, and that's when I experienced major depression, and it was one of the darkest times of my life. And I think going through that, I think now looking back, I don't look at it like it does suck to be like, man, I literally lost my senior year, and there was so much I would have, like trajectory wise, things could have gone differently. My GPA went from a 4.2 to a 2.8.
Wow.
But I don't, and so I wasn't able to get into necessarily maybe the school that I could have gone into, the college. I was totally out of it, even when I was trying to apply to colleges, and then on top of it, AP tests, failing most of them. So it really significantly, impacted me. But at the same time, I look back and I just look back with a lot of gratitude, because in that time, I don't know if I would have gone into filmmaking without that. I escaped into films, and films were like my savior, because those were the one thing that I was able to escape out of my, and also find hope and in stories of protagonists overcoming insurmountable odds.
So think about it. What if it hadn't happened, right? Maybe
Yeah,
you would have taken on some different job for the next
secure.
25
Yeah.
years, instead of going into entrepreneurship. And, that during COVID, I had a business that didn't work out. And up until then, my businesses were at 100% success rate. So I was really feeling good about myself. But it was probably one of the worst times of my life. Well, not the worst, but one of them. By the time you get to my age, you can pick quite a few.
2020 was one of the worst times of my life too, because it really did, it like sort of came full circle. Like I had thought that I had pushed out of that, and I went to college. I started to feel better. I started, like, it took years of really, it took my entire college, 3+ years, to really get to the point where I felt like I was able to be in like a social setting and not be like sweating and like my body was like screaming at me. So I finally, and then when COVID happened, all of a sudden I was in my first year of pushing into entrepreneurship, and really it became about like, if I could push through this, all of that mental mess that I was in, and my body can heal like that, and I can come back and find some sense of normalcy, I can really over that. Really, it really strengthened me, my mental resolve. Like if I can overcome my own mind and master my own mental health, and like really psychotherapy. I tried therapy, and some of the therapy that wasn't necessarily working. It really did come down to working on myself, my mindset, and of course family support, having, people in my life that, like my family, who were always there for me. But ultimately, it all came crashing back down in COVID when COVID happened, because I had just, I had taken on, like, I think at the time I was in 5 figures, 20, like I think 20K of open deals. And then when the shutdowns happened, completely, like I was already investing in all of these projects, and all of a sudden I got like 20K of refunds that hit me. And I didn't have like insurance set up. Like I was just, I had just barely started as an entrepreneur. So again, really dark place to be. And
Well, it really makes you become resilient, right? I mean, at the end of the day, I think you were forced into some significant resilience very, very early in your life because of these challenges that you faced. But, it shows in your attitude. It shows when, somebody really meets you and talks to you. Again, that whole facade, or these ideas that we have about how people in X age group should be. I feel like you break all of those norms and paradigms, because every time I talk to you, I really forget. You're just really a very mature person, and you really know what you're doing at the end of the day. I come to you often for advice on how to market something, how to strategize my posts and whatnot. So it's so much more what I've received from working with you. And it's nice when you have a business relationship and then you develop a personal relationship, and you just find that there's so much give and take from both of those aspects. I feel like that makes life feel so much full. And I think I even posted once about like the old story, don't mix business with pleasure. To me, some of the greatest experiences and the greatest relationships I've ever had are when I've mixed business and pleasure. Obviously, you want to choose the right people. You don't want to do that with everyone, but it can be really rewarding. So I feel like your journeys have really shaped you into the person that you are. And, honestly, my heart goes out to your parents. I can't imagine the difficulties they must have gone through. I mean, I had 2 reasonably healthy boys, and it was a challenge just raising them. So hats off to your parents. It's not an easy job. And, I love one of the stories I think you told me was just about their unwavering faith that your brother is going to improve. And I want you to talk a little bit about that, because he has improved, with that faith that they've had.
Yeah. And I remember, they've stayed so strong. And, even when moments when people on the outside would maybe come to me and say, "Hey, what's going on? Are your parents, is this sustainable? Is this situation sustainable? They're, really 24/7 dedicating their entire lives to your brother's well-being and to keeping him, comfortable and with the family, but ultimately at what cost?" And I remember there was a moment where I even had my doubts, and I came to my dad, and I remember letting him know. I just wanted them to know, "Hey, I just want you to know that, like, whatever you decide, that I understand. Like, if there comes a point where you guys at this point are getting older, and if this is becoming too much of a burden, and we need to find somewhere that can help support him, I just want you to know that and I just remember that crushed my dad, hearing that from me, because so many other people and family members and people out on the outside of the situation that didn't have the same faith as my parents saw it and just went, this is just unsustainable for them. This is shortening their lifespan, and how much stress this is causing for them, and constantly day in, day out, how much sacrifice is needed for this. And I just remember my dad looking at me and telling me, like, he's my boy. Like, I can't do that. I can't abandon my boy. When he explained, when we look at him, when we see him in there, like, he's in there, and he has he has brain stuff going on that we're going to find it's going to be resolved. God's going to, and so my parents' faith and strength, they're like my superheroes. I look at them and I'm just like, they're saints living on earth. And so when a moment happened, I think another turning point was when growing up, there was a few moments where we almost lost the house, because mortgage, and then like the interest rates and all of that. And then my dad with, all of that's going on at home, trying to provide, trying to still go to work full time. And then my mom, sometimes when my brother would have bad days, my dad would have to call out of work, and he was starting to have heart problems. So there was that element of, and I think that's where those opinions were coming from, was like, hey, look, this isn't. And my brother was, I think this was right around COVID time, right before COVID, like right around 2019, 2020. My brother wasn't doing too well. And there was one moment where I got a call from my mom. I was out just doing some music video that I didn't really even, I was just doing it for the money. But I remember seeing the call from my mom, but I was in the middle of the meeting. So I was like, okay, I'm going to call her later. And of course, the meeting went on, and then we decided to go and do something else after. So I completely spaced that my mom had called me. And it wasn't until later that afternoon that I started to see all of the calls and then the texts, that I realized that there was something wrong. And when I finally called them, my mom was like, luckily my uncle had gone over, and so he was able to help them. But I wasn't able to be there for them at a time where my brother had an outburst, and he got up on top of the couch and in the living room, and he pushed through the front window of the house, which is this big window in the living room, and he fell through it. And the window came down and it crashed, and a big piece of glass came down and cut him open on the side. And it was really scary. My parents were like in shock. My dad was in shock. They had to get they called the ER, like the ambulance, and they took him to the ER, but they were able to get him, they were able to patch it up. And luckily it wasn't anything too serious, but it could have been way worse. Like, obviously, like it could have been fatal. So I remember getting on the phone with my dad afterwards, and I just remember him telling me, like, I just think that we're going to have to sell the house because I can't keep going to work. And this is like, a situation that's just, he was having heart problems, kept having to call out of work because my mom wasn't able to take care of Daniel on her own. And it was a situation where I would oftentimes, this was just me growing up, often being like, how can I help? And my parents wanted as much as possible to not involve me. They wanted me to go out and live my own life. They wanted me to be able to go and doing the music videos and do it, and having my, they wanted me to be able to have that ability to, one, live a normal life, and to
Right.
and to get all the opportunities I could for my career. And so
You turned into their superhero at that moment. You did. I know you say they're your superhero, but I
spoilers.
feel like
No.
you turned into a superhero for them in that moment.
I just remember thinking, because at the time my dad was really shaken, and I had never heard that. Really, he had always had kept, this was that one moment where like the faith was really being tested, and I felt like I really needed to step in. Is like, okay, if I couldn't help them in the ways I wanted to, I just remember thinking, there's no way we lose the house. And I remember telling my dad, what about the documentary that we made? In college, I had made this documentary about my brother and about my parents and the sacrifices, just really their day-to-day life. And they had never wanted me to put it out because it was just, they were very private, and they were from probably all of the times that the stigmas, took place and people came up and judged them. They were afraid of, I think, that judgment. And I just remember telling them, like, people are going to understand. The people who have hearts, the people who, they're going to see what's going on and they're going to want to help. But there's no way that they're going to help unless they know. We need to show them the story.
And the vulnerability in that story, that's the hardest thing. That's where our gloves really come off, right? Where we take off that armor and we show people what's really happening in our lives, And I think that's why your story was so powerful, because it's honest, true, raw.
It's the authentic, it's the vulnerability, and it's the I think the one element that video has that this really proved to me was this power to visually prove your story more than anything else. Because the first objection that came up was, we've tried that. We've tried to tell people what we're going through. We've tried to see what support we can get from either nonprofits or from just our community when we were really in need. And in the past, when we were struggling to, keep the house, and we didn't get really much. We didn't get what we, so they just didn't want to do it again. And they're like, we don't want to come at it, I think, in a way that's going to be seen like, this is like a charity. And I said, no, this isn't that. I said, you just got to trust me, because it's the way I saw it is, if people were to just know the truth, not be told, but be shown. Like, if we could show what happened behind these closed doors, behind the walls of this house, then people would want to become a part of the solution. People would want to become a part of the story. They wouldn't need to be asked. They would just step up. So I knew there was people out there. And so there was something that was just calling me to let's just put this out, create a GoFundMe, let people know what's going on, that my parents just need a little support right now. Just to
and
get
what incredible intuition that you had, even just to know that that was the right next step to do, and that's not an easy place to come from, but
I think really it was God, the faith that my parents had, really it was God. And, it was that calling, just, this has to be done. So we put it out, and 300 shares later, we put out this GoFundMe, and it really was just an invitation, just like, if you want to get involved in the story, if you feel like you have something to give. So it was coming from that place of, yes, vulnerability, but also not trying to, go and solicit or try to convince or persuade anyone anything. And I think that was ultimately, again, this is an approach. I think it's something to do with maybe the I know The Secret talks about the law of attraction, but it was this law of attraction. It's we're not asking, or we're not trying to take from anyone. We're giving a story, and we're giving people the opportunity to become a part of our story. And from that, there was someone in Texas who I'd never met who sent $2,000 because they saw the video, they saw the story. And so that really was, to me, that really confirmed what I already suspected, which was the power of visual storytelling could totally transform and bring abundance. And so my parents were able to have a year of living expenses covered, to get back on their feet, which was a huge breath of air for them at the time. And because of that, still to this day, they're going strong in our house and in my childhood home. And I get emotional every time I go back there, because I'm like, man, we're still here. And my brother's doing better every day.
that is just such a fabulous story. And you know what it does? It also highlights the goodness of people, and the fact that your vibration that you were putting out there was not one of manipulation, not one of solicitation. It was about a real need to not only be understood, to share your story, to show your family and the difficulties that they're facing, which is not easy. I mean, we never like to show those sides of ourselves. But I love that the result was so beautiful and so perfect. And because you were driven by this innate sense, I'm sure driven by a higher power into you, because I feel like that's where my greatest inspirations come from. I'm like, what a great idea I had. Well, in reality, I really don't think it was my idea at all. But I just think, and now I feel like those things led you to creating this business brand story that's really showcasing the authenticity of your clients, their stories, raw, vulnerable. I know a couple of times I got teary-eyed and had to fight back tears telling my own story. So that's the emotional place that I wound up in while we were doing my own brand story. So it's just it's a real testament to your process to be able to bring those emotions out, even though I've told that story a gazillion times, but you found this place in me that was even more raw, more true, and more deep than the way that I was telling the story, because clearly I was still telling that story with the layer of covering over it just to protect myself, because these things are hard sometimes.
Absolutely. No, it can be very difficult to become vulnerable, especially on camera.
Oh, yeah.
And tell your story. But that's oftentimes those things that are the most challenging, most outside of our comfort zone, are also the most rewarding. And in this case, after realizing what what that video, what video had the power to do for my own family, that was really the biggest turning point back in 2020. That confirmed, okay, this is the approach I need to start taking with my clients, is authentic, no script, tossing up. Because at that point I had done some business videos, but they would kind of just hire me and then give me the script and be like, here's how we want it done. And these small businesses, they knew the basics about branding and marketing, but I knew I have to become an asset. I have a lot that I really, I think, stepped up to the plate as this really, like, there's ways I can serve my clients. And that same approach I felt when every entrepreneur I met, I was always looking for, like, what is that element to your story that makes you the one of one, like the invaluable asset to your target demographic, to your audience, to your clients. And in finding that, it was like people would say the word niche.
Mm-hmm.
And I started to I hated all of those tactics because they were putting everything in a box.
Right.
And when it really came down to capturing an authentic brand story documentary, we found that our clients were their niche. When we told their story authentically, just this telling of their story, highlighting their why, like why they care, why they're passionate and in it, not for the money, but why they actually really care about helping those that they're serving. And then also getting into the story of the how, which is the logic,
Mm-hmm.
right? What system, what actually logical steps they have in place to help. When we married those two, the why and the how, together, we create these assets that elevate the whole, really just showcase the true value, and become a lighthouse for their target audience.
Right.
While we don't want to appease everyone, right? There's going to be people who hear your story and they're going to see how much of a shining bright you are, shining star you are, like how bright your light is. And they're going to not want to waste your time or theirs.
Because it's not the right fit. So,
right. And so
ideally,
that's saving us time.
When we drill down, I felt like when we drilled down deeper and deeper and deeper, even though a story may have similarities and aspects to other stories we may have heard, I feel that the more you drill down, there is that essence of uniqueness in every story that's going to niche down so perfectly that they identify with their perfect client. Wouldn't you say that's true? Because you may have to dig deeper sometimes, but you find it.
Yes, when you dig deep enough. And also you stay true to those details that make your story only yours, those plot points, right? When it's like we go deep, we find the emotion, we come back on top, and then we find the right plot points to actually tell in what order. And then we also find the ones that aren't needed, that may have been being talked about too much over the actual important plot points for our audience, which are always going to bring us back to that heart center. And, again, it's you can't appease everyone. So but this is the biggest problem I see with small businesses, is they're trying to please everyone. Mm-hmm. And so their content, the way they design it, the way they design everything is, they're attracting the wrong audience.
And so much of it is attracting the right people. And that was really why I decided to work with you, because I have attracted the wrong people in the past because maybe my story wasn't authentic enough, or the way I told it wasn't the right way. Who knows what it was? I didn't know what the issue was, but once I worked with you, I understood clearly what it was. Mm-hmm. And, I have to say that it was really an enlightening experience, just even in the depths of my own story. I felt working with you allowed me to access a part of myself that I had actually kept hidden. And I'm the big proponent for being vulnerable, saying all the things, but,
That's another thing. And I love that you said that, because I have problems. And here's the thing. I'm supposed to know all the answers when it comes to this stuff, right? Mm-hmm. But when I get in front of the camera, I can't be my own director. So here's another thing, is like a lot of business owners will say, I can just do it myself. I'll just put up my phone. But at the end of the day, like at least for me, it's really helpful to have someone on the outside who can
Right.
be that test audience. Someone who, as a director, really the goal of a good director is to just be your first audience.
Well, the
And
bottom line is we live in our head, right? So there are aspects of our story which make complete sense to us because we're living in our head. And I know there were several points you stopped me during and said, well, I don't understand what you mean by that. And, in my mind, I know what it is because I know my own story,
you
but
have all the context.
exactly.
Yeah.
So just to have somebody stop you and say, even though you knew my story, but you knew that context wasn't being delivered. And that's so important. I'm looking and I'm thinking, wow, I could talk to you for another 5 hours. This is usually how our situations go. And one of the things that I love about you is that you're so multidimensional and you have so much great content to share, not just about your work, but just about things in general. I mean, you've become my go-to guy for I don't know how many things. Poor
Well,
Evan, he can't get rid of me.
no, no, that's something I love is that we've become such good friends. And, a few years ago, I would have never thought that I would be such close friends and have such badass clients like surgeon, like ex-surgeon / badass
Oh, thank you.
speaker, coach, author. So I feel the same, likewise, same way,
Well, it
as
goes to show
Melissa.
you that life can just take you in the funniest directions. And, my whole brand is being based on being unbound. And to me, our relationship is another example of an unbound relationship. Who cares if there's, different upbringings, different backgrounds, whatever. It's funny where you can really find a common thread in so many people, even though you might not realize it if you just look deep enough. So, and I do want to have a couple of things that I want to let our viewers know. Number one, if you would like to check out my brand story, I'm putting the link down below for my YouTube site. So you can also find it on my YouTube channel at Gloves Off TV. Subscribe and you can watch the brand story video that Evan did for me. And I want to end a little bit with you, Evan. Just kind of walk our audience through what it's like working with you, how they reach you. I'm going to put your website on the bottom, but just, take it away and let them know what they can expect.
Okay, yeah. So first and foremost, before a camera even gets put up, it's always about diving deep into your story and even forgetting about the brand. Like, who are you as an entrepreneur, as a person? And when we dive deep into both your story and the customer journey, that's really our first, that's the biggest, I think, differentiator. What makes us unique is just how much time, and it's not like a long drawn out process. We do one big deep dive session, 2 hours, where we get really clear on who the customer is, what are their hobbies, what do they love to do, what's going to get them emotionally invested in your story, and then what are the elements of your story where we're connecting, we're relating, and we're building connection, we're building authentic know, like, and trust. Because at the end of the day, whether it's business, whether it's life, we don't want to either build friendships, we don't want to do business with people that we don't know, like, and trust. And so that is ultimately that is where we do consulting calls. We'll just straight up help clients with just their brand story if that's all they need help with, all the way to full brand story documentary packages that include the deep dives, the consulting, as well as the content, which is what we did with Dr. Kapana. And we love that process. We can shoot 3 to 6 months of content in 2 to 3 days. And of course, the brand story is included in that, which is the centerpiece website, social media asset, right? How do we truncate and bottle your whole legacy, your impact, your story, and your customer journey in 3 minutes or less? That's the goal. So.
Yeah, no, and I have to say that one of the other inadvertent things that came out of working with you is that I actually really found a different version of my own voice. So there's even a deeper layer of authenticity that I'm finding when I'm doing my own videos, even the ideas it's inspired for my own content. So it's been a positive experience for me all around, so and I love it. I love it when something in your life allows you to experience a greater depth in a relationship and in yourself. So that's always a win-win. I can't thank you enough for being here today, Evan. I was really looking forward to this conversation. I want to thank all the viewers for watching. And please, if you're liking the content on this show, please like it, share, give me some comments. Happy to hear your feedback. And I will see you guys next week.
Thank you.